Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to this special edition of Movie Goodness, where we are reviewing the latest addition to the Evil Dead franchise, the newly released Evil Dead Rise. How are we doing, everybody? This is my review. I've been anticipating watching this film, being a huge fan of the Evil Dead franchise, dating back to 1981 when the original came out, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell, and on and on and on. I went into this pretty optimistic. I really had low expectations, to be honest with you. As excited as I was, I had low expectations, meaning I wasn't expecting the greatest horror film of all time. I wasn't expecting to witness the reinvention of the wheel here. I was really just uh, excited to see where we're going with this franchise. Is it going to be something fresh, new? Is it going to be a rehashing of one of the previous four films in the franchise? What are we going to experience here? Man, I must say, I loved this movie. I absolutely loved Evil Dead Rise for so many reasons, which I'm going to dive into. First and foremost, Evil Dead Rise is written and directed by Lee Coren, and I think this is his second film. His first film was A Hole in the Ground, which I have not seen, but I plan to see now after watching this film. Evil Dead Rise does something that I was not expecting. It takes the franchise, turns it on its head, give us something very fresh, very new. Um, in the aspect of it doesn't follow the traditional tropes of the Evil Dead franchise, but at the same time stays true to the rest of the Evil Dead films. You know, we have the Book of the Dead, we have the incantations through a recording, you know, we have the possessions and all this here. All that is present, but it's done in a different style that I have not experienced throughout the whole franchise. First and foremost, this doesn't take place in a cabin. All of the other Evil Dead films takes place in the cabin, with the exception of Army of Darkness, of course. But you know, it's more of a continuation of part two. So technically, you could still link it to the to the cabin, but this doesn't. This takes place in a apartment complex in Los Angeles. The synopsis for Evil Dead Rises is a reunion between two estranged sisters gets cut short by the rise of flesh possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of a family reunion. It is a very, very disturbing film. It is gory. I'm gonna tell you that off the bat. This is probably the most bloody Evil Dead film out of the previous four. This is the bloodiest, but it's not the goriest, if that makes any sense. There's gore, there is gore, but I'm not. It isn't like torture porn. You know what I'm saying? It isn't hostile. It isn't films like that. It's just bloody, really, really bloody. Very, very creepy. This is very creepy. Uh, Whereas the other films in the franchise, you can gravitate to the comedy element of it, you know, due to the direction of Sam Raimi and the acting of the great Bruce Campbell. But this film has zero comedy. There's no laughing in this movie. It takes itself pretty seriously. And I know that a lot of people were not big fans of the remake or the reimagining that came out in 2013, I believe. Uh, it didn't have much comedy in it, but it was basically a remake, you know, just told a little differently with different characters. I initially thought that this would probably be kind of a continuation, if you will, of that film. But this had zero to do with that film. This has zero to do with the other films. This is a standalone film in the franchise. The performances in this film stands out the most to me. Yes, the horror element is there, but the standalone thing here, it is actually a film, and it is the acting that drove this. Alyssa Sutherland, who I have not seen in nothing. I think she's been in films, and I haven't noticed her in anything else. Very beautiful woman before she gets possessed and, you know, looks like a demon for 90% of the movie, but very beautiful woman. And man, creepiest demon I've ever seen. I mean, she owned this. I think she really does need an exorcism. I think somebody needs to spray her with holy water because she killed it literally in this role. I mean, a beast. I was creeped out by her performance as the mother in this film, and she gave a performance unlike anything I've seen in a horror film. And I'm not trying to oversell it here, but I can't think in recent memory. I probably if I think back and go over some horror films, of course I'll find a performance from two or three actresses or actors that transcend the film that they're in. But right now I can't think of one. She has a performance where you actually feel sympathy for her throughout this whole thing, even though she is tearing people apart. You know, she is going after her own children. You know, it is so heartbreaking, especially when she's possessed and she's able to break free for a minute and she can tell her sister, you know, don't let them get my kids. You know, and it's like, oh my god, this is gut wrenching because she knows this is it for it's no coming back for her. It is over for her. You know what I'm saying? It is so disturbing for a mother to have to go through that. And she did an excellent job, you know, in this role, playing this character. And when she was full on creep, she was full on creepy. My God, bruh. The children here in this equation, awesome jobs by these kids, especially the young actress who plays the youngest child. Can't think of her name, but I think it's Cassie. Is the character's name? Neil Fisher. I'm thinking that's the youngest one, and she really run a good job from this little girl. I mean, because she held it on. I mean, she was like the most powerful one there, you know. And I'm not saying superpower wise. I mean, performance wise, really good job. The other kids, the teenagers, they did a good job. You know, the other sister, uh, the character Beth, portrayed by Lily Sutherland. Oh, what a good performance by her. You know, a strong woman. I think she was actually the weakest out of them, and she did a good job. But if I had to rank them all, she's probably the weakest performance out of the group. But they all did an excellent job. But oh my God, Alyssa Sutherland. Whoo, boy, I cannot wait to see her in other things. That's how impressed I am with her. And she is a beast in this film. Um, there is an absence of Bruce Campbell in a sorts. The video, I mean not the video, but the audio recording of the incantation, you know, of the ritual reading from the book, that's that voice on the recording is Bruce Campbell. So he does sneak into this film in a way. So I was pleased to hear his voice. I like, okay, that's a good nod to the franchise, giving respect and love to the fans of this franchise. I thought that was cool. Um, this is non-spoiler, but I will talk about one scene in this film that I need to talk about. It ever since when it happened, I was like, man, I'm going to talk about this if I don't talk about anything else. So if you don't want to hear anything, you want to go in completely blind. Now, what I'm going to say doesn't affect the end of the movie. It doesn't spoil the end or anything like that. There's really no spoilers in this scene, but I know a lot of people go to films, they don't want to know anything about it. They don't watch trailers. They don't want to see nothing or hear anything, and I respect that. I'm like that to a degree. But yeah, if you don't want to hear anything about this film, you've been warned. This is the little section I'm going to talk about one scene. Now, there's a scene in the middle of this film that is probably one of the best horror film scenes I've seen in recent memory. And it was done so well. It was done so perfectly and so simple that when you watch it, and if you have watched it, you know what I'm talking about. It is the scene when they're looking through the eye hole, the little peephole through the door, and uh Ellie, the mother who's possessed, and they locked her out of the apartment, and she's in the hallway, and they're looking through the peephole, and the other residents, in the apartment complex are trying to fend her off, and all this here, and you're just getting this through the peephole. There's no other perspectives. There's no other camera angles. You're getting this through this peephole, and it was done so well. And it was so horrifying to see her just tear people apart through this peephole. you know, uh, not really showing anything. Like I said, this wasn't gory in the sense of just showing people getting their guts ripped out and all this other stuff, like horror films like to do these days. Just unnecessary gore. This was done out of the perspective of the camera, and it let your imagination do the work. And whenever your imagination goes to work, that's when it's like, oh my god, like what's going on? All you see is this blood splatter, or people just falling out of frame. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh man. But that scene was the just pinnacle of this film, and it made you realize that we're in for something different. Now, at this point, we're in the middle of the movie, and a lot of stuff had happened before this. But at that point, you're like, man, what, what more can happen here? And trust me, a lot more happens. Now, this film does have a little nod to the originals in the sense of they do have a cabin in it, and it's in the very first scene. This scene is booked in by two story. Well, it's the same story, but at first you're gonna be like, "What is this? This don't have anything to do with anything," but it's linked. It is linked, and that's all I'm gonna say because if I go any further, it'll spoil something. But it is very, very smartly done. Speaking of that opening scene, this movie has the best title reveal in the history of film. I loved the title reveal. Evil Dead Rise, when it pops up on the screen, it is like chef's kiss. I adored this movie, and I guess it helps due to the fact that I went into this with zero expectations. I wasn't expecting to get my socks knocked off, and they were. And that's all I can ask for from this horror film. This is a true horror film. This isn't a blood fest, just gross out movie. This wasn't that. This was a true horror film and a great addition to the Evil Dead franchise. I am so impressed with this film, and I completely understand why the executives at Warner Brothers chose to release this film in theaters. Initially, in case you don't know, initially this was just going to be on HBO Max. It was exclusive to HBO Max, and it was supposed to come out last year. But I guess the executives or whoever it was watched it and like, wait, no, 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 no. This needs to be in theaters. We need to put this in theaters so the world can see. And great decision. Great decision. I enjoyed it. Evil Dead Rise gets a letter grade of an A minus. I think it's one of the best horror films in recent memory. I I can watch this movie over and over again. And if you're a fan of the Evil Dead franchise, you would not be disappointed. Yes, you don't have Bruce Campbell, but the last one didn't have Bruce Campbell either. But I think this was a smart film. Smart film. It wasn't just thrown together. This was a very well constructed film. Yes, Evil Dead Rise gets an A minus. But I would like to know what you thought. How did you feel about Evil Dead Rise? Or have you not seen it yet and you're thinking about seeing it? Hey, man, I highly recommend it. Please go watch this movie. Go watch it in a dark, dark theater. But I would like to know if you have seen it, how did you feel about it? You can email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter at KB Radio Network and on other social media networks. Just look up the KB Radio Podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is you're currently listening to this show, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you don't mind. And don't forget, we're on YouTube. So swing over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, give this video a like. I would greatly appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for joining me for this review of Evil Dead Rise, the 5th installment in the Evil Dead franchise, and dare I say, one of the best in the franchise. Good job from all the filmmakers, the actors, the actresses who all put this together. Bravo, bravo. Everybody, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.